Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Zadov's chess channel, and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit series. So in this series, we're following some great defenses and some great lines after the first moves d4, d5, and then c4. So we're continuing now our Slav defense battle with the Czech variation and with the classical system of the Czech variation. We have recently talked about this Czech variation. In order to get a better understanding of this particular video, you can also watch my previous analyzed games in the Czech variation. The Czech variation, in my opinion, is simply the best approach of blacks in order to beat the 3 knights variation that white can prepare in the Slav defense. As I said, you cannot sometimes just beat someone in 15-20 moves. These are sometimes really positional struggles, positional battles, and that's why the Czech variation at least gives black an equal game from an early stage of the game, and that's actually, I think, black's main goal. I think when you play as black, you want to at least equalize the game as fast as you can. So that's why, in my opinion, as I said, the Czech variation is simply the best approach of blacks how to beat white's 3 knights preparation. So here d4 can be played. We have d5, c4. We have analyzed this line. So c6, knight f3, knight to f6, knight to c3, and now my recommendation is to go here with the move d takes c4 because it's simple idea to now break the position on the queen side with the move b5, so white would be pretty much forced to play the move a4. We'll analyze also some ideas of bishop to g5, but the game can transpose into some very tactical battles. So then with the move b5, black would find a way to fix the position on the queen side. So that's why we're analyzing first this move a4. Now bishop to f5, very important move now for black. Bishop to f5 in order to control the e4 square. What white would love to do, if you don't play, for instance, here the move the bishop to f5, if you play e6 or something, or a passive move, then we can, I think, immediately have a nice centralized pawn storm here with bishop to c4 ideas. Of course, black can counterplay this idea with the move b4, but in my opinion, e4 is more aggressive and we can get really powerful center. So here bishop to f5, never allowing white to play the move e4 himself, occupying the e4 square. Now at least we have now a centralized structure here. The knight and the bishop are controlling the square, which is very important. White will still struggle for the square. White is still continuing the attack of the square. The problem, I think, even if you manage to pull this e4 somehow, black still can break the center with the move c5. You should, from white's perspective, also consider the move c5 by black. Black will play this move very often in order to leave you even with an isolated pawn. Let's see, maybe if you try e3, a c5 could happen. Maybe not in an early stage of the game like this. A c5 wouldn't be so aggressive now because black hasn't castled. Black needs first to secure the king. But as I said, here after bishop to c4, c takes d4, and maybe after e takes d4, white can be always left with an isolated pawn. But in my opinion, this pawn, this isolated pawn on d5, it's not such a huge problem because white has a huge activity with the minor pieces. You see the knights are on natural squares. Bishop to c4 is here. Bishop to g5 can happen. Queen to b3, double attack maybe here on b7 and the square f7. So that's why breaking the position with the move c5 is a great opportunity for black, but I don't think you should do it from black's perspective in an early stage of the game. You should first castle, securing the king, developing minor pieces, and then in one moment I think it's then time to break the position with the move c5. So here after move e3, you see many times the normal approach of blacks with the move e6, so first developing. Here bishop to c4. Okay, white has its pawn back, but now the problem of white is always this idea here that white is stuck with the dark square bishop. The dark square bishop doesn't have a good activity. So the first game that we're analyzing in this position, it's a game played by Garry Kasparov against Vladimir Kramnik. I think this game is very instructive. It shows the main tactical and positional problems of these types of structures. So as we said, black can counterplay. Knight to d7, maybe c5, bishop to e7, bishop to b4 is also an opportunity then to attack the knight, which is basically controlling the e4. As we said, we would love to break here with the move e4 because when we watch the pawn structure in the center, white has two pawns in the center. So what I mean about the pawns in the center is of course that we have a pawn on the d file and also a pawn on the e file. Black is a pawn only on the e file, so when it comes to pawn central control, white is slightly better. But what I don't like in white's position is of course the dark square bishop. The dark square bishop is the main strategical problem of white. So that's why black will many times battle for the e4 square by pinning the knight with bishop to b4, attacking the knight, which is controlling of course the e4 square. So now castling, and now there are many ways you can play queen to b3. Queen to b3 can be met with a5. The bishop gets fixed, and there's no problem here for black, I think, to play the move a5, although it seems so you weaken the pawn structure on the queen side. But actually black is better on the queen side. Black has a 3 versus 2 situation on the queen side, so that's why black can do this. Black can maybe even find a way in the near future maybe to break the position with the b5, or as we said, the c5 I think is simply a great idea for black to somehow cement the position and maybe attack white center. So here, after the move castling, my recommendation is now to play the move queen to e2. Queen to e2 leaves us, I think, the best way and the best flexibility in the game to play this move e4, because still we have e4 opportunities. The problem is now, let's see a passive move like knight to d7, and then e4 could happen, and the problem is now you cannot take bishop takes c3, because first we can take out this one, and you see now the bishop is hanging. If you retreat, then you simply lose the battle here around the square e6, so that's why you should do it. So the best way for black after the move queen to e2 is simply to retreat with the bishop. And now if white wants to chase the bishop on g6, white can do it. Of course, you'll see many times this idea, knight to e5, which was also played by Garry Kasparov. But actually what black is doing here is he simply not caring for the bishop. So the problem is now after knight to d7 and knight takes g6, h takes g6, is that you don't have any more defenders in front of the king. So you don't have any more minor piece defenders here from white's perspective. The main problem now is even a tactical for white. There are maybe even some ideas of bishop to d6, and then maybe some Greek gift tactics with bishop takes h2, then followed with knight to g4, and then queen to h4. You should always be careful. We'll analyze in the future of this series also some ideas of this tactics by black. Black will do this very often. You should be careful. As I said, sometimes consider this tactics, because you don't have minor piece defenders. That's the most important thing. And so far it wasn't played in this game, but we'll, as I said, in the future we'll see particular examples that in which black simply sacrificed everything around the square h2 and then brutalized really white, because white never came out here with the bishop. The bishop was simply stuck on the starter square on c1. So I think the bishop on c1 is actually the main problem in white's position. So that's why black is simply playing now a bad bishop strategy. Although black doesn't have the bishop pair, but the knights are controlling the center very good. As we said, with even e5 or c5 we can break the center, so no pawn central control anymore for white. In one particular moment you will have to trade off your centralized pawn for a c5 pawn or e5 pawn, and then basically you don't have such a great pawn storm in the center. So that's why mission accomplished here for black. Black has equality here, and black can proceed now with this very powerful knight in the center. So this is now, as we said, the position between Garry Kasparov and Vladimir Kramnik. After h takes g6 we have rook to d1. This is very important because first of all we're bringing the rook on the same file like the queen, and the main issue is now, as we said, after potential c5, maybe c takes d4, e takes d4, you will be left with an isolated pawn, so you want to even to support it further. Rook to d1 is very important. Now queen to a5 was played here by Kramnik, and now h3, preventing some knight activities. As we said, there are maybe some ideas of queen to h5, knight to g4, maybe attacking the h2, so this would be a perfect setup then for black. Rook to d8, and now bishop to d2, played by Garry Kasparov, and now comes this move e5, and the engine gives here 0.0 evaluation for both sides. So as we said, it seems so that nothing special is going on, because white is still the bishop pair, but believe me when I say this is a perfect position for black. Black with the move e5 breaks simply here already the center. We have bishop to e1, very important maneuver. You should always know this maneuver. So move the rook from f to d1, bishop to d2, and then bishop to e1. That's one of the main maneuvers, I think, from white in this particular setup, because first of all, we're staying at least on this with this bishop on this diagonal, but we're also connecting the rooks, so we're never left our rook connection. Still the rooks are connected, so if even something gets traded on the default, then maybe this rook can come into the game. So that's why you see many times this maneuver. It's really a common maneuver in the Czech variation of the Slav defense. You should consider this maneuver because it helps you out, because at least white is doing something with the bishop. As we said, we cannot just improve this bishop's activities so fast. You have to be patient here in this position. Bishop to e1. Now comes this idea: e takes d4, rook to d4. We don't want to have this isolated pawn, but now after move knight to b6, here Vladimir Kramnik challenged the Garry Kasparov's rook. We have bishop to b3. Garry Kasparov didn't want to lose now his light square bishop. The light square bishop is very powerful. The dark square bishop is not so good, but at least the light square bishop is perfectly fine. Here rook takes d4, and mission accomplished here for black. E takes d4. We have rook to e8, and now queen to d3, knight to b5. Knight from b to d5. Very pragmatic idea here for Vladimir Kramnik to simply play on this blockade idea. Whenever you face an isolated pawn, you should simply protect that square in front of that pawn, so it means you have to build a blockade against an isolated pawn. So here black is, I think, even strategically slightly better. So after move knight to d5, bishop to d2, here queen to b6. Well, that was actually the main mistake now in Vladimir Kramnik's game. So the mistake that Kramnik made was actually a tactical one, not a strategical one. Here bishop to c3 is perfectly fine. Here after b takes c3, you can go even into two knights versus two bishops and mid game, because you don't have actually so many troubles here with this knight. Even if this knight get challenged with the move c4 somehow, there are always good escape routes. There are good squares all over the board. So here the engine suggests, for instance, this particular line. After move queen to b6, it was a tactical problem. As we said, we have now this powerful control around the square d5, so it's not a strategical problem that black has here. After move queen to b6, a sharp attacker like Garry Kasparov sent some blood immediately with move a5, and now he played this line, which was very good, took a pawn, and white is much better. But okay, as we said, the main strategical goal here is accomplished, I think. Let's go back to this critical moment. Queen to b6, the engine simply doesn't like. So as we said, you can hang on to this position even if you don't take out the knight. I think the perfect blockade around the square d5 is perfectly fine here for black. So black is building simply this idea, and no counterplay in the center here for white. White has to again play a different approach, has to play a slow game, has to play, I don't know, more positional game. Trading off the rooks on the e-file maybe is also an opportunity. So as I said, but the point of this particular line is that black can equalize the game. Black has 0.0 position. I think it's good while playing as black. So let's check out now another example. Again, this ideas, three knights variation: d takes c4, a4, bishop to f5. Now it's a game played by Anatoly Karpov against Vladimir Kramnik. So Vladimir Kramnik is now our hero of this video. So in the first game, I just wanted to tell the game between Kasparov and Kramnik. Kasparov won the game because you saw the problems, the tactical problems, but now we'll see now great gameplay by Vladimir Kramnik. Again, this setup, we have now e6, bishop to c4, bishop to b4, castling, and now again this idea, queen to e2. Bishop to g6, again retreating immediately. We don't want to be vulnerable immediately with the move e4 or knight to e5, and again black simply leaves the bishop hanging, no problem there. Many times you see this idea, knight takes g6, h takes g6, and now rook to d1 played by Karpov. Now we have queen to a5, immediately attacking the knight, bishop to d2. Again, e5 or c5 is the main goal. We want to break the position in the center. Very important stuff to never ever allow these two pawns to get connected on d4 and e4. Now Karpov played here d5, and okay, d5 basically is telling us that we have now a closed game. The center gets more and more closed. Black could maybe here proceed with the move c5, but I don't think that's such a great line. Actually, there is a great way now for white to cement the position with the move e4, or even to play something like knight to b1, and then maybe trade off the dark square bishop, get rid finally of this dark square bishop 4. But I think e4 would be much better here. Then we could liberate this diagonal and maybe include finally our bishop into the game. Maybe first protect with rook to c1, this knight on c3. So as I said, c5 is not so good. We should I think keep the tension here in the center, never block the position too much. So here rook to d8 was played by Kramnik. Here Karpov took, d takes c6, we have b takes c6, and now after bishop to e1, again this maneuver that you'll see many times. What white is trying now to do is maybe even to play something like f3, e4, and then bishop to f2. That could be also a very nice setup, because black still has worries about the c6 pawn. It's an isolated pawn. It's of course not such a good idea. And now here Kramnik closes this idea with the move e4. That's actually great play, because we have now this knight versus bishop middle game, where of course white has the light square bishop, black has now the knight for a bishop. So whenever you play knight versus bishop middle game, you should close the position as much as you can. So with the move e4, very good move. This move creates of course a space advantage, and now f3 is I think a suicide, because with the move f3 you would weaken the position too much. After something like e takes f3, g takes f3, the pawn gets naked, the king gets naked, pardon me. Bishop to d6 would be then, as we said, maybe something like queen to c7, then bishop to d6, then maybe attack the h to include somehow maybe even the knight into the game. Tactically I think white would be simply lost. So after move e4, again equal chances for both sides. The engine loves black's position also. So as I said, I think this Czech variation of the Slav defense is simply great. You can use these moments here, bishop to b3, queen to e5. You see how Kramnik is attacking here the h2. As we said, that's also a tactical problem that you face many times. Bishop to c2. Even this bishop is not so good, because it doesn't have support. The bishop is very good here on this diagonal, but it doesn't have any support. Here bishop to d6, as we said, g3. Here the position had to be protected. Knight to c5, king to g2, queen to f5. Here rook to d2, bishop to e5, and now rook to d1. Here bishop to b1. You see how white has problems with his bishops. After bishop to c3, here Vladimir Kramnik decided to go now into two knights versus two bishops middle game. You should consider this option. You have seen also in this particular game between Kasparov and Kramnik that the engine suggested also to go with two knights versus two bishops. Here the same example, bishop to c3, b takes c3, but now the pawn can be taken on a4. Here it's a weakness too, the weak square. Here knight to c4. You see how Kramnik now maneuvers the knights. The knights are very good here, and now the f3 is simply weakness. So Vladimir Kramnik won this game very easily. So I'm not going to analyze now the whole game. The games, as I said, will be in the description below. You can maybe analyze them for yourself, maybe try to see some other tactical and maybe strategical opportunities, but the main goal I think we have accomplished. So first we're breaking the center. Let's go back after e3. So bishop to b4, castling, securing the king, no problem. Bishop to g6, so retreating. Now knight to e5. Okay, you can take out your bishop, but we're simply developing. Knight takes g6, h takes g6, and now queen to f5. We get our queen out, attacking the knight, and now bishop to d2, e5 or c5, breaking the center. That's the most important thing. The knight on d7 is very important, can recapture. Queen can recapture. If you, for instance, take out immediately, then knight to e5 or queen to e5 will happen. So the knights will be then very dangerous. As we said, the tactical problems are there with the queen and bishop battery on dark square. So it's simply, I think, a very pragmatic idea here for black, and I think black can equalize the game in an early stage of the game. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you realize these ideas, because these are very important stuff. Please study the Czech variation of the Slav defense, because it will happen to you many times. It's simply one of the most annoying and positional struggles in the Slav defense. Maybe you're not liking this video so much because it isn't so sharp, it isn't so tactical, but that's simply, as I always like to say, how chess games are won. It's simple as that. These are really some great battles and struggles in chess. So you see now how both sides are basically battling for one square, one active piece and similar stuff. So it's simply great to watch these types of structures, because they're giving us many opportunities for both sides. So as I said, if you want to study more the Queen's Gambit, please check out my series from the beginning. Here's the link of our series so far. You can maybe also analyze some other defenses that are bothering you. And if you have troubles maybe to play as black, check out my hyper accelerated rank Sicilian defense series as a good response to e4, and my Nimzo Indian defense series as a good response to d4. And of course, if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.